Hello friends, hope everybody's doing well today. So here is the scene I'm going to paint. It's down at Lake Roosevelt here in Arizona, directly east of Phoenix. Big, huge reservoir out in the desert. And I figured this would be a good opportunity to demonstrate a value study in real time for you. I usually don't include that in the video, but the reason I wanted to do that this time is this scene is kind of tricky to understand what the different values are doing because the lighting is a little funky. It's kind of semi-overcast, not as intense sunlight. The water in the background is kind of a strange dark color. Then we've also got this beautiful gray sky with these clouds and then those mountains in the background. So I'm going to show you my thought process and how I go about separating out the different values of the scene. Because if I were to attempt to paint this scene as it is without doing a value study, it would just be too overwhelming. There's way too much going on. There's too much detail. There's too many different variations of value, and it would just be a mess. And I would end up being frustrated and disappointed with the result. So let me show you how I go about doing a value study. So I'm going to be using just straight Payne's gray for this. So I'm going to mix up a big puddle of Payne's gray. I'm going to look at my reference photo. I'm going to squint my eyes. And that's going to help me see what's going on a little bit more easily. It's going to fuzz everything out and it's going to make things look more abstract. So I'm looking at the scene and I'm starting to realize what is going to be in the middle value. This entire tree is going to be middle value. The shadow, the cast shadow of the tree, there's this dead trunk right here that I want to paint around. Keep that white. It'll be a really cool little area of contrast. The lake, middle value. Most of the ground is going to be light value right here in the foreground. There's going to be some areas of texture that I do in middle value. This strip of land and then the background mountains are also going to be middle value. And maybe a few areas, a few of the darker areas of cloud here and there. So I'm just going to start painting this tree. Just very loosely indicating the shape of this tree. I'm not spending a lot of time on this. This is not a painting, this is just a value study. So my goal with this is to split the scene into 3 values. So the white of the paper will represent the light values. And then this wash of Payne's gray that I'm doing now will be the middle values. And then within this middle value shape, I will add a third wash of darker Payne's gray, and that will be the darks. So now that I've kind of thought about what is going to be included in the middle value range, leaving some gaps in the tree for the sky to show through here and there. Once I've thought about what's going to be in the middle value range, I needed to find a way to try to connect those different areas of middle value into one big shape. And that'll make for a very powerful, compelling, and easy to read composition. And I will show you what I mean in just a minute. A few little branches here. This also gives me a chance to test out the composition and see if it's something that I like and if it's going to work. I try to take my reference photos with that in mind ahead of time, but it's nice to test it out on the paper. So the tree is done. So what's going to connect to the tree? Where's that next point of connection going to be? Well, it's going to be the cast shadow on the ground, right here. The shadow is physically going to touch that tree, the trunk of the tree. So just very quickly dropping that in. And that cast shadow is going to go all the way out, and it's going to go around, or rather, I'm going to paint around this dead tree right here. So there's going to be a little bit of a break in that shape right there. And it'll go out that way, and it'll kind of fade as it goes that way. And this is all just going to be darker grass right here. And there's a few other areas of dark grass here. Maybe some here, just here and there. Just patches of darker foliage here and there. So now I'm going to think to myself, what else is middle value? And where is it going to connect to what's already painted? Well, as we said before, the water is going to be middle value. So we'll paint that water and we'll touch it right into the shape of that tree. Paint around that little trunk. And that little strip of land right there is going to stay light value so that there's a bit of separation between the water and the land. Painting around the other side of that dead tree. That'll be a really cool effect. I'm excited to see how that turns out in the painting. Bring that water down to where it touches the land. I'll paint the other side of the lake. Oh, these branches are going to get painted over, but I'll put those back in with the darks. Painting over that little island or prominence right there. Actually, yeah, this is going to be middle value too, but this little strip at the bottom of that piece of land is going to be light value. Give a little contrast, and the color distinction between the green and the blue of the water will help create that separation between those two parts. Okay, and it's really amazing, just with one tone, one color, and one value of that color, we can already start to see the scene coming to life. You can tell pretty much exactly what's going on. And this energy is what I want to carry into the painting, this very simple, bold, clear, understandable energy. So we'll paint the landscape in the background. A lot of that is going to be middle value. And see how I'm touching that right into the tree? I want those shapes to physically touch each other. I'm going to leave a little strip for the shore on the other side of the lake, right there. Moving over to the other side. far distant mountains. Again, painting around that dead tree. And a little tiny strip right there. Now, these hills right here have kind of a lighter sandy color. And here is where I need to make a decision. Is this going to be middle value or light? If I squint my eyes down, these cliffs are a lot brighter than the ones in the background. And I do want to keep that contrast, so I think I'm going to keep a lot of these cliffs light value. I'll add a few areas of mid here and there, just indicating those areas where there's a little more foliage going on, especially around this trunk, so we can still have that pop out and stand out against the background. Learning to see the world in this way is not easy to do, and it does take quite a bit of practice, but you can get there. And doing value studies like this is the way that you retrain your brain to see all of this stuff. So, there's our middle value shape, and that's the really big thing that I'm going for with these, is what's the middle value shape? Where are all the points of connection going to be? How is everything connecting? What is the movement of the composition actually doing? And I'm seeing that there's a bunch of dead branches sticking up, and they're really contrasting against the water here and over here, and I will definitely be adding that in the actual painting. I'm probably going to paint a lot of these in gouache, the smaller ones anyway, because that would be just such a pain to paint around. I might also be able to scratch them out with my fingernail. So this is all stuff that I'm thinking about. This is the planning phase for the painting. That's what this is. It's planning the painting before you actually paint it, and it takes so much of the stress and uncertainty out of it. Watercolor can be very stressful. It can be very intimidating. But this is one way that I've learned to reduce that stress and just give myself more leeway and freedom to play around and be exploratory. So the paint's kind of bunching up right there, but that's not going to be an area of dark. That's still going to be mid-value, and it will lighten up a lot once it dries. Remember, watercolor dries lighter. You always got to keep that in mind. So, really, the only area I think there's going to be darks is within this tree. There's just a few areas in the foliage, like right here, that are more in shadow. And a lot of this dark, when I do the actual painting, is going to be applied while this wash is still damp. I like adding the darks to foliage while the first wash is still damp, because it creates this beautiful fuzzy, soft wet into wet effect that just works so well for painting accurate and convincing and realistic looking trees. And this is just an extremely simplified version of what I'm going to be doing later. By keeping most of the darks in the objects in the foreground, that will help bring those foreground objects more forward. So we paint those branches and that trunk back in dark. And there's a little area of shadow that goes over this way, and it kind of drops off. Another branch right here. Goes up into another area of dark. There's a little white branch right here that I'm going to try to scratch in. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for darks. Most of the darks are in that tree, and that's going to be, I think this is going to be a very powerful composition. It's so simple, but simple is powerful with painting. Simple is powerful. You don't need to paint these crazy complicated scenes. I mean, you can if you want, but I found that the more powerful compositions are the simpler ones, and I enjoy painting simple things like this. It's just very satisfying, finding the beauty in simplicity. So, let me reset everything and we will start with the actual painting. Okay, let's get into the painting now. So, got my scene sketched out here. Now I need to wet down both sides of the paper, just like always, with a sponge, so that the paper lays flat without me having to tape it down, and so that I have more time to work wet into wet. Trying to wet it down as evenly as I can so that the paper doesn't start to buckle and crinkle up. Alright, so we got this beautiful gray sky. We're going to start with that. I'm going to use some ultramarine blue and some burnt umber. Makes up a nice gray color. So we'll drop in this initial wash of light gray kind of across the whole sky. I'm going to warm it up in the middle just a bit. Just adding more burnt umber will warm that up. Kind of imitating the way the clouds are moving with my brush strokes. Bring that all the way down, paint right through those mountains, right through the tree. This is all going to get, well, not all, but the tree and the cliffs are going to get painted back over with a much darker wash. Bring that all the way down to the water too. Now I'm just going to darken up a few areas here and there. Like right there where those clouds are darker, over here too, up there. So this a little bit darker, thicker mixture of paint. Tap that on I've got a little rag right here off camera. I use this to control the wetness on my brush. I just get a bunch of paint, I get a bunch of paint on it, and then I just tap it a few times on that rag so that I can paint wet into wet without getting cauliflower edges. We'll make these clouds look nice and soft and fuzzy. I really want to capture the moodiness of this scene, and the clouds and the sky are going to help a lot with that. And I'm trying to be very expressive with my brush strokes. Darken up some of these clouds over here too. Painting sky is just so fun. I always love painting interesting skies and clouds. You can be very, very expressive with clouds. And I'm painting these clouds right through this tree, even though it's going to get covered up. But it's going to be there, and you'll be able to see it peeking through here and there behind, as I leave gaps in the canopy of the tree in the second wash. No, I don't want to mess with the sky too much more than that, because it'll start to look funny. But I do want to darken up the base of this cloud just a little more. I want it to pop just a little bit more. I want it to have a little more shape to it. So same mixture of colors, I'm just darkening it up a little bit. Don't be afraid to go dark with watercolor. A lot of beginners struggle with that, and I struggle with it too. The darks are what give you that sense of volume and three-dimensionality and contrast. So I guess this will be approaching middle value, but not quite once it's dry. And this is all done while the paint is still wet. And it gives you this beautiful magical effect, and it's so good for painting clouds like this, where they're more fuzzy and soft looking. There's a little bit of a glow happening right in the middle of the sky. It's beautiful. I'm really happy with that. So now let's get all that paint off the brush and start painting the stuff in the foreground, just toning the paper. Just grab some of that burnt sienna and mixing it into this grayish color that's already on the palette. Maybe add a little red to it. The dirt has kind of a reddish cast to it. And everywhere else is going to be covered in that yellowish grass. So we'll just grab some yellow ochre, drop it into that bluish color right there. Cadmium yellow, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, just different blues and yellows. to be a little more vibrant than that, so we'll add more cadmium yellow. And the top part of this area of land is going to start bleeding up into where that water is going to be, but that's fine because I will be able to tighten up that edge once I come back and paint in the middle value shape of that water. So it's alright if it bleeds a little bit. Drop some yellow in there, here and there. That dead grass. Just setting the stage for what comes next. Alright. So that is first wash done. So now we've got our light values established. The sky is done. So we need to let this dry completely dry. And then we will start working on that nice big middle value shape. Okay, our paper is dry enough. So let's paint this big, beautiful tree. It's got an interesting color. It's a different kind of green. It's a more teal blue kind of green. So let's see how we can get to that color. I believe this is some sort of eucalyptus. Obviously not native to Arizona, but has become a part of the landscape. We'll start with a basic kind of green, just cadmium yellow, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue. Remember, this is the middle value, so I need the color to be darker than the first wash. So let's try to add some of this cobalt blue light. I think that's what this is. Actually, let me make sure. What color is that? Yeah, cobalt teal blue. The other variety I had of that was cobalt blue light, but it's the same color. Shout out to Daniel Smith Watercolors and Winsor and Newton Watercolors. Those are my go-to. Maybe add some of that turquoise in there. I don't use that blue too much. You'll notice I have 5 different blues on my palette. Blue is the color I have the most variety of, because you can just create all these different subtle effects. But I don't really have that much else on my palette. It's very simple. Yeah, more heavy on that cobalt blue light. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to just hint at the color of that tree. I think it's so pretty. Add some burnt umber in that to kind of dull it down a little bit. More cobalt blue. Yeah, that's what I needed. More cobalt blue. There you go. We're getting there. Sometimes you just gotta keep playing with it till it looks right. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll start dropping in this canopy. Trying to stay loose. Very simple, big brush strokes. And using a big old brush like this big quill brush helps with that. I'll leave some gaps in the canopy for the sky to show through. Trees look weird if you don't leave gaps in them. They just don't look right. And then you can kind of paint little branches in there too, like just like that, just little indications of branches. Now, at the edge of the canopy, I'm kind of breaking the shape up a little bit, just like that. And that will help give the impression of those individual leaves. So you're giving the illusion of a lot of detail without painting much detail at all. Even a little gap right there. And change up the color of that green every now and then. Maybe try some dry brushing every now and then. Just create a little randomness. And most of these branches I'm just going to come back in with the darks and paint those then. I'm not going to paint them right now, because it'll just get painted over anyway. Okay. So here's the canopy done. I do need to start dropping in some of those darks for the canopy of the tree. I'll just paint that trunk real quick. Just mixing up a dark brown gray color. Same colors I used for the sky. Maybe we can drop in that cast shadow too. Add a little more blue to that. So that shadow is going to touch right into the shape of the tree, just like that. It's all connected as one shape. The shadow continues over this way. Goes out like that. Now we get to that dead trunk. We're going to paint around that. Just like that. Just following my value study, just referring back to that, see what's going on. Drop in some of those areas of darker grass here and there. So see what I did there? I splayed the brush out so that it's kind of spread and it's got these little teeth. And this clump of grass right here, I can just paint with a little small upward stroke like that. And just like that, you've got little blades of grass. It's that easy. Just adding some texture to the ground. All right. Let's get some darks into that tree. Oh, it's still damp. Mix up a nice dark blue-gray color. Once again, same colors I used for the sky. That's going to mix into the green in this tree. And this is going to create some beautiful three-dimensionality and volume in this tree. All right. Let's drop in that water. Clear out a little space on the palette. We have a nice greenish blue-gray. We'll start with ultramarine blue. And mix it right into that green that's already on the palette. That'll work well. There's some of that burnt umber in there too. If you can, always try to use what's on the palette already. Yeah, that looks about right. So, I'm going to touch right into that tree. Start painting the water. I am going to switch to a smaller brush. I need to be tight with some of these details, so I'll switch to my Escoda Perla. Painting around this dead trunk. Right, there's the lake. Paint that little land jutting out right there, leaving a little gap at the bottom to indicate that sandy shore. And we'll start working on the background mountains. Just kind of a gray, warmer gray. Maybe a little cooler than that. Touch right into that tree. Leave a little gap right here between the land and the water for that area of exposed rock right there. And we'll paint these mountains that are farther back in the background, and those will be more blue. There's that dead tree again, paint around that. Making very distant things more blue helps them appear more distant. It creates a bigger sense of depth. The farther away it is, the bluer it tends to be. It's a pretty solid rule of thumb that you can follow. Just following my value study, just painting the exact same thing I did in the value study, except now I'm painting it in color and I'm being a little more careful with the details, but it's really the same thing. I'm just going to add a little warm color to these cliffs right here. I said I was going to add some of that white foliage, and I still might do that with gouache later, but I'm not completely sold on the idea yet. I kind of like how it's looking just as it is, but we will see. We will see what I do. Believe it or not, we're getting pretty close to being done with this. Simple, quick, but still powerful and beautiful. I'm the kind of artist that doesn't want to spend weeks on one composition. I have too many things I want to paint. I'm just adding a little texture to the ground with some dry brushing here and there. Just here and there. Nothing crazy. Just making it a little more interesting. Roughing it up a little bit. Roughing. Every now and then it helps to take a step back and look at the entire scene, just to make sure everything is going how I want it to. I do need to darken up this trunk and a few other areas in the tree, but I need that to dry out a little more, so let this dry out and I will continue with this tree. Alright, just a little more texture here. Add some shadows on this dead trunk. Yeah, that's really cool. I really like how that turned out. I'm probably going to come back in with the gouache and add a few highlights on that. So let's darken up this trunk here. Make that really pop out. Even add a little tiny bit of texture in there too. Show some of the bark, which you actually can see in the photo. You can't, but I can. Because you just got a teeny little photo on that screen, but I can see the whole thing. And this is all exactly what's in my value study. I got this little area here that kind of comes down and out, like that. add back in some darks in this canopy. Just really make certain areas pop doing this. Just a few areas, though. I'm not going to go crazy. Don't want to kill all of the lights by going overboard with the darks. I'm really squinting my eyes and looking at, okay, where are the absolute darkest parts of this tree? And that's it. Kind of hint at some thick branches going up. Trying to vary my brush strokes, doing some tapping, doing some swirls, doing all kinds of random stuff. Making my brush strokes random. Doing some very light dry brush marks here and there. That'll kind of help pop out the texture of the leaves. I do like doing paintings where you spend almost the entire painting just on one tree and really diving into the details of that one tree and understanding it in its entirety. Alright, I think that tree is pretty much done. Now I just need to add some gouache in here and there. So this is just going to be artist gouache, titanium white, straight from the tube. So I need to add back in some highlights on this trunk. See, that's the thing. If you accidentally paint over an area that you needed to keep for highlights, you can just add it back in with gouache. It's not a big deal. Gouache is amazing. It's also technically a watercolor or water media. It just has more pigment than water, and watercolor has more water in it than pigment, I believe is how it works. Don't quote me on that though, I'm not really a gouache expert. Just throw in some white branches here and there, branches that are catching the sunlight. Just a few. Yeah, I'm going to drop in some of these dead branches sticking up. I think I've decided that's what I'm doing. It just adds really cool interest. And it will also help break the foreground and the midground where the water starts. I don't want to add the ones over here. See, that's the thing. You don't have to copy exactly what's in the values or the reference photo. It's just a reference photo. Use it as inspiration, but don't copy exactly what's there. Just creating a little more separation between the far distant shore and the water. The reason I don't want too much going on over here is because the focus of the painting is this, not this. But if it helps Lee dry towards that, like you'll notice how the middle value that I've painted on the ground here is kind of doing this, goes up and then over and then boom. So everything is kind of leading your eye towards the main subject, even the way the mountains kind of drop down like that and then back up right into the tree. Everything is pointing or hinting subtly to this. So one of the hallmarks of a good composition. All right. Last but not least, I will just add a few birds in the sky. Just a few. I'm not going to do a big flock. Just add a little life. Just very subtle. So, there you have it. That is a finished painting. I had a lot of fun with this one. I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed painting this. I hope you learned something, and I hope I'll see you on the next one.